And we're going to be reading from another book. So, Lynn Castaldo, this mic is all yours.
Welcome, everyone. And I just have to add, Mike, thank you so much because great lessons today, as always. But I want to start out with this because you reminded me what my goal was this week and I lost it this morning. So here we go. Seek the secret of love and seek purified love, that love of the heart. Seek God's true glory, the supernatural grace. Um, and I just wanted to comment before I forget on blessing everyone. I used to sit in class assemblies, school assemblies, and just sit there and bless all those involved, and I've learned to start doing that, wherever I'm in a really big group, just to bless. Um, and I love that last question. What would God have you think? You know, get out of my ego. Hey, Sharon. Hey, everybody. Um, yeah, get out of my ego. All right. I believe we are on page 70 of the book, A Course in Miracles in Christianity, a dialogue with Ken Wapnick and Norris Clark, W. Norris Clark, who's let me get this right, Roman Catholic Jesuit priest and philosopher. So we are discussing the similarities and differences in A Course in Miracles and Christianity. And it's been very challenging. It's been quite enlightening, I think. And then I'm thinking too, we have to remember what's written for the times. I keep going back to the times where everything is written and what's coming forth. And I love that because there's so much that came forth between the 70s and now. That's not to say the others aren't important because they are very important, but I think we just have to keep an open mind. What would God have me think?
Exactly, Lynn. And you know what is really interesting is I just saw that the Pope is asking all Catholics to read that document that I sent to you, the writings from Pope John the 23rd, that the changes that they did in the 60s. It is amazing. Um, and I'm just so glad that he's taking us back into that thinking that was happening when the church did begin to change. And I recognize that this Father Clark, who is speaking with Ken, he is kind of still on the old bandwagon. Because I know that when I look at it, especially the true teachings of Christ, which are not really represented by any of the churches, really, because they all kind of made up a lot of their own agendas. But the teachings of the Catholic Church are different than the teachings of the Baptist Church or the teachings of the Assembly of God, or there's a lot of differences in what they believe Jesus was talking about. So I do appreciate that this is a specific point of view and doesn't represent all Catholics and definitely doesn't represent all Christians. That's my point of view about this book. So just to throw that out there.
Mm, yes, and let me remember to say, please join in, unmute yourself or just raise, I I should see your hand, but if I don't, because I'm reading, please unmute yourself and join in because that's how we learn together. Um, so I I don't,
And McKaylee has
yes.
her hand up.
Oh, please go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say I love what Lynn just said. And yesterday I was looking at the Ethiopian Bible,
Yes.
and And it's very interesting because it's the teachings of Christ, goes in line kind of with what Lynn was saying. And it's he's all teaching to look inner, that the kingdom of heaven is within you. So it's really beautiful. So thank you, Lynn, for sharing that.
And I've been following that too, and how they're talking about, he kept it a secret until his deathbed, and so very interesting. It wasn't time, and now he said it's time. And then someplace else I heard how time is collapsing. There's so much happening behind the scenes, that we're just not aware of. So just show me, Lord. Show me what you want me to see. So I'm assuming we're on the bottom, or are we on that paragraph?
I'm not sure. I just put a bookmark. We might go back and read the paragraph
Yeah,
because,
let me read that with Clark.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I just
And
moved
I
back
really
to that
appreciate
page.
you doing that. I think it makes it so much better. All right. So Clark says the notion of two levels of consciousness of self is also quite prominent in the Vedanta. Just recently, I was speaking with a famous Indian philosopher. He was speaking about living consciously down in this world, which is real for our purposes here, where you really have moral responsibility and you have to meet your obligations. See, that's the part I think that we skip. We don't realize that in order to do all of this, we have to be purified. Our hearts have to be purified. Here you really have moral responsibility and you have to meet your obligations. A whole world of things that are very important in this world of secondary reality. It is, it's very real, very important. You have a whole set of moral obligations and duties in life, and so on. But then, when you get in the higher state, all that multiplicity somehow drops off. So there are two levels of the same being. They don't quite speak of it as a dream exactly. Some will speak of it as a kind of illusion. Others will say it's impossible to understand. But once you are in the upper level, then all the multiplicity disappears. Perhaps the Course's view is very similar to that. So what's coming to me are all the rooms that St. Teresa talked about. The interior castle, all these different levels that we have to attain. You know, I get very upset because of my husband's road rage. And I was driving with my daughter and she got angry at the same thing. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, maybe it's not just him. Maybe I'm picking on him for something that I've just overcome, which was quite an eye opener. Like maybe I'm I'm actually following more than I realize I'm following. But I'm really glad we went back to that paragraph. Um, Moral obligations and duties in life. Anybody want to comment?
Yeah, I love that, Lynn, especially everybody gets upset about something that they feel puts them in some kind of danger or puts other people in some kind of danger. You're thinking you want to protect yourself or the public or whatever. So you see people that are driving in a way that you think is dangerous, then you're going to get upset because you're afraid. And in this world, fear is appropriate. But in God's world, in Christ's kingdom, there's nothing to fear because nothing can harm a son of God. So, the idea that you can be harmed is just an indication that that you don't you aren't living in excuse me, faith, you're actually living in fear. So I think, it's the same with Jesus was not living in fear. Jesus was living in total faith. Jesus was, I mean, there would be, how many of us has ever said before the soldiers come into the Garden of Gethsemane, how many of us said, "Hey, Jesus, get out of there. You know it's coming. Go run away. Go someplace else." Why? Why?
I've had that thought, believe me. Even when he's standing in front of Herod and all, all those, and I'm saying, answer him, tell him.
I just tell them something. They don't want to do this really. Just tell him something. But he knew and he wasn't afraid. So, I can't change that. And I'm glad I can't because that, my fears would have ruined it all. If he did everything I was afraid of, and wanted to change, we would never have had the crucifixion or the resurrection or the assumption or none of those things, the ascension. We would have none of those things. So, you know, you don't know. We don't know. So, anyway, I'll let you read on.
Yeah, I'm just going to comment one time. I appreciate your comments, but it was more that people drive too slow. They turn too slow. So I'm thinking of, I think it was Mike that said, is it love or fear? Or is it love or judgment? I think it was more love or judgment. But then again, I'm judging him. So it's a vicious cycle. But okay, so Wapnick. Yes, it is very similar. And A Course in Miracles would basically say the same thing you are saying. When this collective dream is over, what the Course refers to as the second coming and last judgment, all memory of the dream is gone, disappearing back into its own inherent nothingness. So, going back to that lesson 129, beyond the world is a world I want. I just, I have to be realistic because sometimes I feel like, oh, I'm just dreaming, I'm just seeing with rose-colored glasses. I've been accused of that a lot. But it's like, be purified. Know the secret of love. So Clark says, of course, as I have been saying, a Christian would have great trouble with the notion that God does not know everything that is going on, even a dream. So Wapnick says, a lot of students of the Course have the same trouble. And Clark continues, since God is the sustainer of all being, even of the one that's thinking and everything that we think or dream, even a dream isn't just simply nothingness. It is the activity of a real dreamer. Hence, to think of something going on that God doesn't know and isn't somehow supporting and cooperating with would be a very different notion of God for me to make sense out of. That God is not really the sustainer of all being and doesn't know what we know, i.e., our dreaming. That would be implying limitation on God. It would seem to us that he should know that with compassion and try to bring us back to reality. It is not a limitation to know the imperfect, but only to be it. So I'm thinking of the Garden of Eden. Why didn't God stop Eve? Why was evil allowed? You know? And then I think about the 400 years, before Moses. There's so many things that are just puzzling that we're just trying to put into a neat little box and it doesn't fit neatly. So Wapnick says, the interesting thing about your statement that God's not knowing about the dream places a limitation on him is that it is used by A Course of Miracles as proof of its own position. So let's see what this means. The Course would say that even knowing about this imperfect world, let alone interacting with it, would limit God by stating that imperfection actually exists, reflecting that the impossible has happened. But I guess what they'll bring out is free will. This would support the ego's belief that it has successfully placed a limit on God by creating something outside perfect oneness. The ego's belief that we've placed a limit. This once again highlights the difference between A Course in Miracles and Christianity. We always come back to that basic metaphysical distinction. A Course in Miracles, after all, is a perfect, non-dualistic system. There is nothing outside totality, wholeness, the everything. Or in St. Paul's wonderful phrase, God is all in all, which Jesus quotes a few times in the Course. Therefore, again, how could perfect God know about an illusory, imperfect world? And Clark says, yes, now on that level of living down in this world, I think the notion of ego, which we haven't had enough chance really to develop, the notion of ego constantly using excuses, the body, for example, to flee from God and blame and project blame onto others. It's a very rich psychological insight. That is really one of the things I like a great deal, as you know, about the Course, despite my trouble with the origins of it. But it would seem to me, at least for the Christian, that it is very important for a person to admit his or her own guilt first. That I made a choice, it was a bad choice, and I could have done better. It is not just, oh, I didn't know any better. It was ignorance. Oh, I'm not responsible. We are to take responsibility, as in the Old Testament account of David stealing Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, 2 Samuel 11 to 12. He had Uriah sent to war where he was killed, and then David takes his wife. Samuel accuses him, and David says, I have sinned before God. There was no business about the subconscious did me in, or someone was trying to persecute me, or the environment was poor. He says, I have sinned before God. Taking responsibility for one's sins, then, should not really oppress one with guilt, because once one has done that before God, then God forgives it and it is gone. You should not go back on it. But you have that sense of of humbly being a forgiven sinner with a new kind of love. The idea is to take responsibility for one's own sin, but not to burden with this terrible, constant burden of guilt. To admit your guilt and then ask for forgiveness would be an important difference. A lot to unpack in that one. But I was just thinking, so David said, I have sinned before God. I was so disappointed in him. But anyway.
What a jerk.
But anyway, what happened after that? Did he still stay with her? Does the Bible
Yeah.
tell us?
Yeah, he still stayed with her because her husband was dead.
At
He
that
sent
point?
her husband out to be killed in the war so that
Hmm.
he wouldn't be there bothering him while he was there diddling his wife. This is just, David really puts me on my last nerve because, he did some pretty not so good stuff. But he kept running back to God. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Uh, I screwed this
Mhm.
up. But anyways, enough of that. I don't- It's irritating to me, I'll tell you what.
Again, that's seeking the purified. If you love God that much, you don't want to do anything against that love. Like you don't want to hurt the person you love, but that's like an agape love. Um, all right, so we're up to Wapnick. The course would actually agree with you on that, Norris. They have a point where they totally agree, huh? The difference is that A Course in Miracles does not see the process of looking at one's guilt and accepting responsibility for it as having to do with God as such. Frequently, the Course is misunderstood by its own students, which is what led me many years ago to start talking about level 1 and level 2, since the Course's metaphysical teachings are often confused with its practical teachings. So very often students have misinterpreted A Course in Miracles to mean that since it says that there is no guilt and all this is a dream, then I can do whatever I want and I am not responsible for it. That's one of the things that bothered me. I have always felt like, no, people use that as, oh, I'm not responsible. Yes, we are responsible. We're more responsible. Then Wapnick says, or if I am responsible, it is all an illusion anyway, so it doesn't matter what I do, etc. Many people have, unfortunately, done in some fashion what David did, and then justified it on the grounds that this is all a dream anyway. So what difference does it make? That would be the furthest you get from the real teaching and spirit of A Course in Miracles. Anyone want to comment on that? Again, it's always the interpretation, but go ahead, Lynn.
I was going to say this is one of the major things that non-Catholics complain about Catholics, because you can go do anything you want during the week, go Saturday to confession and be absolved of your sins and go get communion and just like nothing happened. And then the next week you can go back and do the same thing over, as long as you go to confession and get absolved of it. That's what,
Did we
that
lose
whole
you?
thing with
Oh,
David and Beth. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Can you still hear me?
yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. So what happened in that story is, Uriah, the husband, was out at war. David saw Bathsheba, fell in love with her, went over and they got together and she got pregnant. And David, in order to try to hide the pregnancy, ordered her husband to come back from battle to be with his wife. But the husband refused to do that because he didn't want to abandon his troops. And so then David ordered him to be sent to someplace where he'd be killed. And so and so she was pregnant. They got together, they got apparently married after her husband died. And then the baby was born and then the baby died. And
Mm.
so, David had all this, to amend for. And then they had the next baby that they had became King Solomon, who was also a pretty big jerk too, and did some pretty awful stuff, but he was considered to be a really wise guy. I think those people back in those days were really confused about this idea of morality that we're talking about. Um, but it's the same story. It happens all the time. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that happens all the time in this world. And so that's, I think it's just uh, this concept that we have that we can sin and be absolved. And this is why the world has to be an illusion or a dream, because it's impossible. You can't sin against God and be absolved and then go sin again and be absolved. That doesn't even make sense to an idiot. And
Mhm.
even the stupidest person would say that's not right. So, why would
And what
God
did
go
yeah,
ahead? What?
what did Jesus say? Go and sin no more.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. So, it's the whole idea is that once you've been absolved, then you just don't do it again. But that's not the way this world is. And so, how could God be the sponsor of a world like that? It,
Yeah.
it couldn't be God's world where you could do those kinds of things. It has to be a dream. It has to be a story because in the real world, none of that could ever happen. I mean, that's just my thought on it.
Mm. I have to tell you, I really appreciate the wealth of your knowledge and going into the Bible as much and the books that you know. And I didn't see that Macaulay has the laws of cause and effect on it from before. I
Yeah,
don't know if
yeah.
I don't know if she wants to say more or I missed it. It was probably pertaining to what I was reading. But go ahead, Lynn.
No, that's all really I wanted to say is that, that's why the world, and Michaela, she does have her hand up. So,
Please
uh,
go ahead.
yeah.
Oh, well, I love how Lynn told the story because some people may not know the story. So Lynn knows the Bible, seems like very well. But yeah, I mean, it's laws of cause and effect, and that's still within this dream too. Every day, you're either making your samskara, your karmas, or it's how the Course speaks about it in the laws of cause and effect. So, of course, David uh, he created, he made karma between himself and Uriah, her, her husband. So, yeah. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you for explaining and going deeper. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to continue with Lopnik. The Course would say, using David as an example, that what would be truly healing and responsible would be for someone to recognize having stolen another man's wife and then seeing to it that the man was placed in front of the lines of battle so that he would be killed and gotten out of the way, that the real cause of his actions was his desire to keep the separation real, to keep himself so guilty that the love of God would be blocked in his mind, or that he would not be aware of the love of God that was already present in his mind. And finally, using David as an example, that his pretense of being innocent was being totally irresponsible to Uriah and himself and to God. Okay. So to keep himself so guilty. And then, of course, which I didn't know about the pregnancy, Lynn. I don't know whether I didn't know or I forgot. But then the guilt, that he's being punished would definitely cover the love of God. And he's saying that it's totally irresponsible. So Clark says also to think that he needs to be filled up because he is empty. Well, Nick says, absolutely right. Yes, that really goes to the core of the course's teaching on special relationships. See, you are quite a student of the course yourself. Go ahead, please, Miguel. Nicole.
Oh, I love this about Araya because and also it goes back to the original separation and the guilt is there. But I mean, what kind of a man was Uriah that he would not leave, he wouldn't leave the battlefield. He saw himself as one with his brothers. So Araya was really sounds like an incredible person. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, his commitment to his troop. Yeah. I was thinking about that today, in the United States, it's Memorial Day. So um, there's been so many reminders to remember that the Memorial Day is for the veterans that have died. And as I was thinking about it, I was thinking, yeah, and all those veterans that comforted the dying and the families, the nurses, just extending all that love. So anyway, I'm sidetracking. Um, so Clark says, well, that's the good part of the course. So it just reminds me of how I pick and choose, on all of it. So Wapnick says, actually, the dynamic of the special relationship is crucial to the thought system of the course, as I mentioned earlier, that we feel we are lacking something within ourselves, that we have banished God from our minds entirely, and so there is a big hole. Then we have to fill up that hole by taking things, stealing things from the outside. A Course in Miracle explains that that never works because it still does not change the basic premise, which is the belief that I have lost the love of God and lost my identity as God's child. I remember hearing the song Redeemed by Big Daddy Weave, and the impact was so strong. It was like, yes, I am redeemed. I am God's beloved child. It was so powerful. So Clark says, and actually, there isn't anything that could fill that gap except God. And Wapnick again says, absolutely right. And A Course in Miracles is very clear about that. It says at one point that the only real relationship we have is our relationship with God. And what we do is use other relationships as a way of substituting for that, so that, and Clark jumps in, or you could use them as positive ways to express that. For example, a loving relationship. Wapnick says, yes, or you could really join with someone not in the sense of trying to possess, cannibalize, or attack them, but to really join with Christ, with the Christ in another, which is mirroring the Christ in you. This joining really means accepting the joining that is already present in the relationship. The Course would call this a holy relationship, the process of shifting the relationship's purpose from one of separation and guilt to one of joining and expressing the love of God. And this brings me back to blessing everyone, joining in a global sense, right? Um, so it says the process of shifting the relationship's purpose from one of separation and guilt to one of joining and expressing the love of God. And Clark says, or to fill up a need. Wapnick continues. Yes, and the only real need we have is to remember that we have no needs because we remain as God created us. That is one of the Course's main principles. So Clark says, could you go back now to the case of David and how the Course explains that? Wapnick says, yes. So what A Course in Miracles would say to David to begin with is just what you are saying, that you believed you had a need that could only be met by stealing another man's wife, right? What A Course in Miracles would say on a deeper level is that David was reenacting his belief that he had stolen from God, because That is basically what the ego's thought system begins with. It begins with the belief that God has something I do not have, namely, that he is the prime creator. The ego wants to steal that from him and usurp his role as prime creator or first cause. Then the ego feels guilty for that sin of stealing from God. That is the beginning of the fall from the Course's point of view. The guilt over believing we have stolen from God. And then the fear that God is going to come raging after us and steal back from us the power we stole from him. And then he would destroy us. A Course in Miracles sees the world, to return briefly to this important point, as the place in which we hide from God. That is the Course's view of the world. Wow. Believing that we could actually steal from God, that we are that powerful, how foolish. That God's going to come raging after us and steal back from us the power we stole from him. And then he would destroy us. So deep within us is that
Sharon
horrifying.
has her hand up.
I'm
And
sorry, go ahead, Sharon.
yeah,
Oh,
Oh,
go
I
go
was
ahead,
ahead.
Lynn.
gonna, no, I was just gonna add that that's why we made religion so scary. We go to hell, we have to have, we're sinners, we come in this world completely innocent, and then the ego made the religions. Now, the religions are beautiful when you can discern which is helpful and which isn't, because there's a deep fear of God in all of us, or else we wouldn't even be here still. So that's all.
Thank you,
You can,
Sharon. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, good
we,
point. Good point.
I mean, we
Yeah.
just wouldn't be here. And it's okay because, we have each other and we are God, in God's essence, or should I say God consciousness. But, trust me, when there's a physical thing going on, it can confuse you. You got to just stay in the stillness and allow that mind to yak away. And that's what I'm doing. So, thanks, Lynn.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, and just seek God's true glory, the supernatural grace that we're given, the secret of love that um, makes everything possible. Does somebody else want to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on this. It is absolutely um, something that I wondered my whole life until I found A Course in Miracles was how in the hell did God make a world like this? And why, you go back to that tree. Why did he even make a tree that would cause us to fall if we ate from the fruit of it? What kind of God would do a thing like that? Put that out there and say, there it is, but you can't have it. Uh, I mean, really, it just seems ridiculous when you think about it. A loving parent, is a loving parent gonna, put a bowl of candy in the middle of the table in the living room and then tell their toddler, hey, you can't have any of that, don't touch it, and then leave the room and then come back and the kid's covered with chocolate and they're like, hey, you're going to hell for this. No, be a responsible parent. Don't put things out there that's going to hurt your child. And so I never could understand, why would God do a thing like that? What kind of God would do a thing like that? And I would ask the nuns at school, they hated that. They would send me across the street to go sit with Father and talk to Father because they couldn't handle
They
my
didn't
questions.
have answers.
They
Yeah,
had no answers, no. And
right.
until I found A Course in Miracles, I'm like, well, this makes perfect sense. He didn't do that. It's a story we're making up about our situation. But the reality of it is God didn't put us here. He made a world, and then we took that world and turned it upside down into a world of fear and judgment. And so, everybody here is of the same Christ mind, but because of our own stories and judgments, we see them as being evil people or bad people or sick people or whatever. But the reality of it is we're all the same thing. So I love, that they're questioning this. And I don't know if you never thought about that, do you just buy it? Yep, God's a real jerk. God is just clueless about how to how to be a parent. That's my
I
sister. I
kind of,
tell that, and she says, "But he is a just God." Justice has nothing to do with this. We couldn't have done anything to upset him. Anyway, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to say that's where free will comes in. He knew that we would fall and we would pick some things that weren't the best for us. But again, he wanted the free will so that we could decide if we're going to love on our own. That's my answer to
Yeah,
it.
and I agree with that because we have to have the will, the ability to say yes, I want you. Um, because otherwise we would be slaves.
Right.
If we had to do what, we think about angels, angels have to do what God tells them or else. No, they don't. They can say no to everything, can say no to God. That's free will. Doesn't help you, doesn't make you happy, doesn't give you good things, but you sure can do it. And,
Mhm.
but you can also choose again. And that's what's so beautiful about this Course in Miracles is it gives us the knowledge that we can choose again.
Very
So, yeah.
valid. Yes, definitely. And that's, I had this, I don't know, I was listening to somebody with the phones and how they've just overpowered us. And I thought to myself, the phone is just as distracting as our thoughts. You have all these crazy thoughts coming to you, but then there's all these crazy things on the phone that you're constantly picking up and getting distracted, and if we just realize that's all that's going on, choose again, don't allow it to interfere, um, because we just become so conditioned.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just the phone. You can pick up the phone and a regular phone, any phone, and call somebody up and gossip about your neighbors for hours. Or you
Mm,
can turn on the TV, get bored, turn on the TV. I can watch any kind of story of judgment I want to find. It's going to be there. And I'm going to be, they're all instruments to keep, you can pick up a book or a newspaper, take a walk downtown, walk amongst the homeless in the alley, you know, there it's the same thing. It's all things that we're using to distract ourselves from the truth of what we are and the truth of what God is. And it can be used for opposite as well. It can be used to remind us of the truth. So it's our choice again.
mm. Okay, so let's go back to Wapnick. So deep within us is that horrifying thought, I have stolen from God. Only that's not the way we think of it, and until you get into the course. And what we all do is what in another contents, Freud described as the repetition compulsion. We are compelled to repeat our sins over and over again. So I think that on the ultimate level, David's stealing of Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, was really his way of reenacting the theft from heaven, stealing from God. And again, what does David do? He positions Uriah to get killed in battle, which is the expression of the ego's belief that it has destroyed God so that it could have its way and keep what it stole. This is the ego's ultimate guilt. So, to come back to the message of Jesus and the crucifixion, in effect, Jesus asks God out for us and then tells us, you believe you have killed God, both in that ontological instant and then on Calvary. But the truth is nothing happened. My love for you has not changed, just as God's love for you has not changed. So to me, that's the whole thing. Jesus was teaching us how to love like the Course tells us. Therefore, I think that what David was doing in that wonderful biblical story was acting out for all of us that theft from God and the murder of God. The reason David is such a popular figure is that he is so human for all of us. He has all the ego foibles that people share, and everyone can so easily identify with him. I'm sorry about messing up all these words. And so, A Course in Miracles would say to David, look at what you have done and accept responsibility for it. But what you have done on the bodily level is simply a symbol. As real as it seems within the dream, it is but a symbol of your deeper belief in the sin of having stolen from God. And what you have to do now is bring your guilt to the love of the Holy Spirit in your mind. This is the love you have sought to avoid through your attraction to specialness, love for the Shema and hate for Uriah. And it is this substitution for God that your actions represent, this decision for specialness that you are responsible for, and which must be undone. So this decision for the specialness you are responsible for, and which must be undone. In this sense, the Course's answer would not really be different, I think, than what Christianity would teach. Isn't that interesting, right? The Course's answers would not be different from Christianity. What A Course in Miracles says is that you bring your illusion to the truth or the darkness to the light. And once you do that, then the light of God's love that is present in our minds, which is what the Course calls the Holy Spirit, dissolves all that darkness. But that cannot happen if we maintain our belief that we are justified in what we have done or attempt to spiritualize our mistakes. That's so much clearer to me. The light of God, the light of God's love, is what we need to call on. The presence of the Holy Spirit dissolves all darkness. So what I'm thinking is when there's horrific things done and people forgive them, they're holding that love and that light, and they're letting go of the judgment and the hatred, and it's amazing. So
You know,
let's see
it
what Clark's. Go ahead, Lynn.
makes me think about whenever like someone that you know or don't know, you know, they die, a child, an adult, an old person, whatever, and you know, whatever they lived their life. I went I went to a funeral. This is, you know, within my family, not direct relative, but within my family, of a man who had married a woman, had a family, had children, and then divorced that woman, went and married another woman and had children with him, and never again connected to the children from the other family. And they did all sorts of stuff. They all played softball in the city leagues, and you know, his kids from the first family did, and his kids from the second family did. They played against each other. They never associated with each other. They didn't relate to each other's as brothers or sisters. um didn't relate to, I mean, he completely dumped the first family. But then when he passed away, we all went to his funeral, and you know, everybody's all, you know, sad over this man who, in my mind,
Mm.
was, a deadbeat dad, basically. And all the, whatever they were thinking about him, but he was dead. So all those sins were like washed away because he was saved. He went to this big church, and everybody at the church, he was upstanding and everything. When the group showed up from the other family, they didn't invite them to stand in the hall with the family, get the photographs with the family as his children. All this kind of stuff is like really bizarre to me, and it's really hard for me to say, well, I guess, I can forgive all, what you put your family through, your children through. But, that's kind of the point of A Course in Miracles, is that in reality, whatever happened, um, it was for the best for everybody involved. And the- it's just hard to even imagine forgiving a thing like that. And yet they all forgave him when he was dead. It
Mm.
was like the story, the
Mm.
you know,
Wow.
and they all, what do they all say? He's in heaven with God. He's in heaven
Mhm.
with God. Well, if you can do all that and be in heaven with God, you can do just about anything, be in heaven with God, because we are all in heaven with God. That's the real world, not this world of uh, abandonment and suffering that we're experiencing here. So we should, what do they say? Laugh at a funeral, cry at a birth, same thing, you know,
Yeah,
because this world is a world that is trials and tribulations. Anyway, I don't
for
know what.
sure.
Yeah.
Sharon, go ahead, please.
What Ken Wapnick has said, I've heard him say it at least a couple times, that it's a blessing and a gift when that we die. In other words, what he was saying is that to leave this world is your gift. To be in this world, as you all know, it's challenging. And of course, we've been given these great teachings. But you know how the human looks at, life, oh, I want her to live, or, I look at that for myself still. Like, I don't want to die. But the bottom
Mm.
line is, I don't know if anybody ever heard him say it, but I've heard him at least twice say that it's a gift. But it makes sense because we're not even in a world. The real us is still in heaven. And the character, which I feel I have to work on much, is to loosen the attachment to this character. Because that's the problem. That's the only problem. So I don't know. But I do feel like, you know, um, to get above the battlefield and to stay in the higher consciousness is really our work. And to also go very gently. And with that, I'm going to put my hand down. Thanks, Lynn. Lynn,
Amen.
you had a great teaching. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a group work, but um, I think that's why we're striving for the higher level. Everybody's got to go through a life review. I mean, all these near-death experiences seem to point to that. Even David Hawkins, they point to that time where you're going to go through a life experience. So even though everybody thinks um, they're not responsible for their actions, they will be, in a sense, anyway. But Lynn, going back to your story, it's so sad. Hopefully those two the children will be able to get past it. But what a shame, to lose all those years. And I'm sure there's a lot of forgiveness that has to go on there. So actually, we're at the end. So we will start with Clark next time. Great discussions today. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of it.
Thank you so much, Lynn Castaldo. And I just want to remind everybody, we're going to be having a workshop at Stony Point in New York the weekend of Labor Day, September 4th through the 7th. And now John just sent me out the brochures, which I'm going to try to put them online and send them through email because I don't have everybody's mailing addresses. But it's going to be great. There's going to be a lot of great people there. Vicky Poppy, John Monday, David Fishman, Lynn Johnson, Glenn Overman, Alan Ishak, Jimmy Twyman, Beth Gear, Corinne Zupko, Mary Beth Scalici, Rodrigo Carres, Booty, Elliot Robertson, Maria Felipe, Dr. Rod Shelborg, Jody Ebling, and Roger Mock. So there's going to be and a guy named Ed Foote who does spiritual dancing. There's going to be it's really a beautiful place. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm encouraging it's Labor Day, so it's 100 and some days away from now. And save up your money or whatever. Uh, and please join us because it's going to be a lot of people from Gather who are going to be there. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing as many of my peeps as I can. So thank you all. I love you. And I'm gonna go ahead and end this. And yeah, hopefully that would be wonderful, Lynn. I'd love to see you. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and close this out and have a great Memorial Day. We'll see you, some of you tonight for nonviolent communication. I'm not sure how many people are going to show up. I think Glorian might not even be there, but we'll see what happens and see you all later. Love you all.
Lynn, Gloria won't be there, and I have people, my family's coming over, so if I can, I'm going to be there because I love going.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you just have
Gloria
to
said she
realize some,
probably wasn't going to be there. So, because she has
yes,
family, she has guests. So,
right. So
yeah.
let's just see how it unfolds.
All right.
All
All right.
right, see you guys. Thanks
All right.
again,
Love
everyone.
y'all.